Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Intent Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a couple of signings, one entry-level contract, one a contract extension. We'll discuss how the NHL's first round finished and preview the second round and see how well I did on my first round predictions. Plus some injury updates because some of those teams still got a little bit banged up over the weekend. And some more off-season updates now with a couple of eliminated teams in the Winnipeg Jets and the New York Islanders. I'm going to do all that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the Intent Hockey channel. I'll kick things off today with a couple of signings that have happened. Just a couple. We'll start off with one contract extension. The Chicago Blackhawks have said that they have extended defenseman Jarred Tinordi on a one-year, $1.25 million extension, and the deal will begin at the beginning of next year. Now, Tinordi was claimed off of waivers at the beginning of this year. Hawks needed some depth on the defensive end. They had moved on from a couple of guys in the offseason to try and be a bit of a worse team this year. They were trying to do a really bad job this year to try and get the highest odds for Bedard. They didn't really get the highest, but they're still top three right now, so they were able to accomplish their goal. But they acquired Tinordi to be a good, valuable depth addition to that team, and Tinordi actually fit in quite well. Tinordi's been in the NHL for the past handful of years. He's definitely had a lot of NHL experience. He's gone from a couple of different teams. But Tinordi's actually been a really good third pair defenseman in some organizations, and he's done his best with Chicago, putting up career high in games played with only 44, and if he did not run into injury troubles, he probably would have gotten into a lot more than that. And points, putting up 2 goals and 8 points in those 44 games. I mean, last year, he played in the AHL majority of the time, putting up 5 points in 32 games with Hartford of the AHL, and then when he was up with the Rangers, he only had a goal and a point in 7 games. So he didn't really get much NHL time last year. So I think it's good to see Tinordi get some NHL time. It's good to see him be a really good third pair defenseman. With the Hawks most likely making some moves on that defense this year. Probably trying to bring in a couple of good young players. Probably trying to move out a guy like Connor Murphy. Maybe they move on from a guy like Caleb Jones. It's going to be interesting to see how they rework that blue line. But they're still a team in transition from being one of the good contenders to trying to rebuild right now, and then in a couple of years' time be a good contender again with some of these young players. But they're going to need some stopgap pieces, and I think Tinordi is a perfect option for them. So he's already fit in really well this year. Signing to an extension is pretty good, and I think Tinordi will continue to be a really good piece for the Chicago Blackhawks. And the other thing I want to get to today was the Florida Panthers, as the Panthers have signed one of their former draft picks, Michael Benning, who was a 2020 fourth-round pick, to a 3-year entry-level contract of $917,000, and the deal began before the season ended this season. So for Benning, he's been playing over in the NCAA. He's actually done quite well. Had 15 goals, 38 points in 41 games last year. A little bit less productive this year, only having 13 goals and 34 points in 39 games. So he didn't do overly bad, and I would expect Benning to continue to do really good for the Panthers. While he hasn't gone into any NHL games, he has been a healthy scratch on the Panthers roster throughout their playoff run this year. So he's definitely done good. If they run into some injuries, I think it's definitely possible Benning could get his first NHL look at the playoffs. Definitely going to be interesting to see. But I think in the next year or two, Benning could definitely be a good third pair defenseman for the Panthers. And especially with the Panthers not having that great of a defense, I think there was definitely a path there for him to be a good third pair defenseman in like the next year or two. So good signing for the Panthers to get one of their young prospects under contract, and hopefully Benning, if not in the playoffs, maybe in the next year or two, can find some role on like the third pair for the Panthers. And good signing for the Blackhawks to see them extend Tinordi, who's definitely fitting really well with the Hawks. So good to see those two defensemen get new contracts, and hopefully they work out with those organizations. Next, we go over to the playoff update part of the video. Now, since we last talked, the first round have finished up, so I'm just going to go by this day by day until we finished, and then I'm going to discuss how the first round finished. So, when we last talked, there were still 3 Game 5s that had not been played yet. That was the Leafs Bolts, the Rangers Devils, and the Golden Knights Jets. So, first was the Leafs Bolts. It was a really close game. The Leafs started scoring with the goal. The Bolts were able to get one late in the first to tie it up, one in the second to take the lead, and one in the third as an insurance marker. And even though Matthews scored with about 5 minutes to go in the third, it made it really close, and it did have a lot of people thinking we could be going to overtime. Tampa did their thing. They held down the fort. They were able to get a late empty net goal. Tampa won 4-2. So don't think it was too surprising for Tampa to push 6. They were able to stave off elimination. This team knows how to win, so it was a really good game for Tampa. So Tampa forces Game 6 against Toronto. That was the 7th Game 6 that was going to be scheduled for the next couple of days. Then you had the New Jersey Devils, New York Rangers. Schmid continued to do fantastic. The Devils would get a goal in the first minute of the first, and they would never look back. A couple goals in the second, and a late one in the third into the empty net. And the Devils just took off, taking down the Rangers 4-0 in Game 5. So for the Devils, that gave them a 3-2 series lead heading into Game 6. And after being down 2-0 in this series, quite surprising that they were having a chance to close out the series in 6. And lastly, on Thursday, we had the Golden Knights and the Jets. Golden Knights had a goal in the first minute, and they were able to take a 1-0 lead to the first. They were able to score 3 goals within the first 10 minutes of the second, allowing them to build up a 4-0 lead. And even though the Jets were able to get a late one, it was too little too late. Knights win 4-1, and they were the first series over. Knights win the series 4-1. So definitely been really good. I don't think too many people were really betting against the Knights, and they wound up being the first team to move on, so good for them. Then we move on to Friday's action, where we have 4 Game 6s on the schedule. We'll start with the Carolina Hurricanes and New York Islanders. Carolina up 3-2 in the series. Islanders trying to push 6. Canes trying to close it out for a second consecutive game. The Islanders were able to score first about the halfway mark of the first period. Hellebuyck scored to give the Isles 1-0 lead. They would actually hold that lead for quite a while, and they thought that they could hold it for the rest of the game, but around the midway point of the third period, Sebastian Aho was the one to break the shutout streak for Sorokin and give the Carolina Hurricanes the draw, 1-1, going to overtime. And as I'll show you here, at the 6-minute mark of overtime, it was this overtime series clinching goal by Paul Stastny that sent the Carolina Hurricanes to a 4-2 series victory over the Islanders and catapulted them to the second round. So Carolina was able to get the win, and they were able to close out the series. Well, they didn't do it in Game 5. They were able to do it in New York in Game 6. So good for the Carolina Hurricanes to advance. The next game was the Boston Bruins and the Florida Panthers. A really back-and-forth matchup. The Panthers were able to get to a 1-0 lead. The Bruins tied it. The Panthers got back to a 2-1 lead. This one went into the first period, Panthers up 2-1. Then you had the Boston Bruins tie it again, and the Panthers retake the lead thanks to Alex Barkov. That made it 3-2 going into the second, and then it was scorefest going into the third. Bruins were able to tie it at 3. Bruins were able to get a 4-3 lead. Panthers were able to tie it back at 4. A shorthanded goal from the Bruins gave them a 5-4 lead. A power play goal on that same power play for the Panthers gnawed the game up at 5. And then, with about 5 minutes left, Lewis Sturinen scored for the Panthers to give them a 6-5 lead. And when Bobrovsky needed to, he made the big saves, and they were able to get an empty net goal, and the Panthers held on for a 7-5 win. So definitely high-scoring affair. Not a good game for the goalies, but definitely both teams had really good offensive games, and the Panthers were the one who was able to come away with the victory. So good for the Panthers. They were able to push 7 after being down 2 games in the series, so good for them. Then you went over to Stars and Wild. Stars having a chance to end the series, and they really did. They pushed really hard early on. They were able to get a 1-0 lead after 1. They added a couple in the second to take a 3-0 lead. And even though the Wild scored a goal in the third to make it a really close game at 3-1, the Stars would score an empty net goal with about a minute left and seal the deal, as the Stars were able to beat the Wild in 6 and send themselves to the second round. So great news for the Stars to go to round 2. And then you had the Avalanche and the Kraken. Kraken with a surprising chance to end the series in 6 on home ice. They were able to open the scoring about 3/4 of the way through the first to give themselves a 1-0 lead, but then it was all Avalanche after that. Mikko Rantanen got a very late first period goal, making a 1-1 game at the first intermission. The Avalanche would score a couple goals in the second and had an empty netter in the third, and they just ran with it, and they were able to take Game 6 4-1 over the Seattle Kraken. So the Panthers and the Avalanche forced Game 7s, while the Stars and the Carolina Hurricanes end their series in 6 and are on to round 2. Then we went on to Saturday game action. We started with the Leafs Bolts again. Once again, another really tightly contested affair. There was no scoring until just after the midway point of the game, where Austin Matthews was able to score late in the second to give this Maple Leafs team a 1-0 lead. It looked good, but then the Bolts really pushed back. Just about 5 minutes into the third, Steven Stamkos would score. Bolts were able to tie it, and even though there was a lot of back-and-forth action, it went 1-1 going to overtime. And in overtime, finally, the Leafs were able to get another goal. After winning twice in Tampa going into this game in overtime, this goal here from John Tavares ended the 19-year playoff drought. Finally, the Leafs win a series. Tavares gets the OT series winner for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Toronto is able to go on to round 2 for the first time since 2004. Just absolutely great news for Toronto fans. I know they've endured a lot of bad luck over the past couple of years, continually being ousted in the first round, and I think getting past the first round finally is a great stepping stone for Toronto. So great news for the Leafs, ending in 6. I think if they were to go back to Toronto in 7, they would still have a decent shot, but with Tampa having momentum, it would have been extremely hard to win it in 7. So to win it in 6 in Tampa, they win 3 games in Tampa. That was an outstanding series. Hard-fought game, but the Leafs were able to come away with the victory. So Leafs ended in 6. Then you had the Rangers and Devils again, but this time it was the flip of the script. The Devils were able to open the scoring again, but after that it was all Rangers. Rangers got a late first period goal to tie it. The Rangers then got a couple in the second. The Rangers then got a couple in the third, and they were able to stretch out to a 5-1 lead at one point. The Devils would get a very late goal to push it to 5-2, but it was too little too late as the Rangers were able to get a 5-2 victory and send this one to 7. So good for the Rangers. I did expect that one to be a very tight series, so I'm not too surprised the Rangers were able to win. And then the nightcap on Saturday was the Edmonton Oilers and the LA Kings. The Oilers got up to a quick 1-0 lead. Sean Durkee tied it for the Kings to tie it at 1. Then a late first period goal and an early second period goal for the Oilers got them up to a 3-1 lead. Then 2 goals in short succession by the LA Kings were able to cut the Oilers' lead from 3-1 to a tie game at 3-3. So it looked like this would be another really close game. Right after the Kings tied it at 3, the Oilers were able to get another one to make it 4-3. That's the way it went into the third. But definitely a misplay from Stuart Skinner early in the third period led to a shorthanded goal from Philip Deneau that gnawed the game at 4-all. But then, as you can see here in this clip I'm going to show you, with about 3 minutes left in the third period, Kyler Yamamoto was able to break the tie between these two teams. The Oilers got the 5-4 lead, they held on to the 5-4 lead, and they won the game 5-4. With the win, the Oilers get the series in 6. So I don't think it's too surprising Edmonton's moving on. Edmonton's a really talented team, especially with McDavid and Draisaitl. So definitely I think it's really good to see Edmonton move on, and they were able to eliminate the Kings for the second consecutive season. Then you had Sunday's action where we had a couple of Game 7s. First was the Boston Bruins and Florida Panthers. The Panthers got to a quick 2-0 lead, late first, early second period goals. Were able to jump out to a 2-0 lead. It looked really scary for Boston, but Boston's definitely going to be pushing back quite well. They were able to get a goal in the middle of the second period to cut that deficit to 2-1 going to the third. And then they got a couple of early goals, one from Bertuzzi, one from Pastrnak, to get the lead back to 3-2 Bruins. It looked like the Bruins were going to end the game, but then a very late goal with the goalie pulled by Brandon Montour sent this game to overtime, making it 3-all between the Panthers and the Bruins. And surprisingly, in overtime, on this goal here, which I'm going to show you a clip of, Carter Verhaeghe was able to score the game-winning, overtime-winning, series-winning goal for the Florida Panthers, as the Florida Panthers in Game 7 have stunned the Bruins, taking the series in 7, and ending the Boston Bruins' 65-win season. This is absolutely surprising. I thought the Bruins, who won the President's Trophy this year, the President's Trophy winner hasn't been able to get out of the first couple rounds to the Stanley Cup Final since I think it was like 2012. So it's been a while since the President's Trophy winner has been able to get to the Stanley Cup Final. And I thought that the Bruins would be ousted, maybe in the second or third round. I didn't expect them to be ousted in the first round. I thought the Panthers played extremely well, coming back from down 3-1 in the series, and Boston just chokes that series lead away. So quite surprising, but the Panthers are the team moving on, not the Bruins. And finally, the last Game 7 on Sunday was the Colorado Avalanche and the Seattle Kraken. It was a really tight game. It was scoreless after 1. But then a couple of second period goals from Oliver Bjorkstrand gave the Kraken an early 2-0 lead. They were able to hold on to that 2-0 lead until the dying moments of the second period, where Mikko Rantanen would score a power play goal to give the Avalanche some life. Down 2-1, going to the third period, Nathan MacKinnon thought he had tied the game with a goal, but the Kraken challenged it for offside. It was ruled offside, so the Kraken remained in the lead 2-1. And surprisingly, that's how the game ended. The Kraken were able to shut down the Avalanche's top players, and they wound up winning the game and the series, as they beat the Avalanche 2-1 in Game 7, and they would take the series 4-3. Quite surprising that the Kraken were able to defeat the Avalanche. A lot of people are saying this is the biggest upset day in NHL history, where you have the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins, who had one of the best seasons in the NHL ever, and the defending Stanley Cup champions in the Colorado Avalanche both being ousted and upset in Game 7s. Quite fantastic to see both the Kraken and the Panthers moving on, but it's absolutely stunning to see both the Avalanche and the Bruins not make it to round 2 in this year's playoffs. And then the last Game 7 with the New York Rangers and the New Jersey Devils last night on Monday. The Rangers were not able to get anything going. The Devils were able to get a couple of second period goals. They got added a couple of third period goals. And once again, Schmid, who's been fantastic since taking over the crease in Game 3, got the shutout again. And the Devils were able to shut out the Rangers for nothing, win the series in 7, and go on to the second round. So the Devils have definitely been waiting for a while to win the first round as well. So see them get out of the first round is quite fantastic, and hopefully they can do some wonders in the second round as they're able to defeat the Rangers, which I don't think many people had predicted. So we have the second round now finished. So Knights 1 and 5. I do not think that is a surprise. The Knights were definitely the better team. I think it somewhat helped that the Knights didn't have to deal with Morrissey for Game 4 or 5 or Scheifele for Game 5 with those two being injured. But still, even without those guys and Ehlers for most of the series, they looked like the better team. They were able to beat Hellebuyck enough. Brossoit made the saves when he needed to. And even though there was a lot of close games there, the Knights were able to come out on top in most of them. They are taking on the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers were able to win in 6 over the Kings. I expected that to be a tight series. It was a tight series. But after being down 2-1 in the series, the Oilers were able to win 3 straight and take over from the LA Kings. So even though there was a lot of overtime action in that one, all 6 games were really close. I don't think it's too much of a surprise that the Oilers are moving on. The Stars were able to move on, being the Wild in 6. I know a lot of people thought that the Wild would be a very tough out, given the fact that they're an extremely tough team to play against, but I did think Dallas had the firepower and depth this year to make it past the Wild, plus they have a really good goalie in Ottinger, and they are going to play the Kraken, who upset the Avalanche in the first round, who a lot of people thought would be ousted in 5 or 6 games, but they surprised a lot of people and won in 7. So you got 2 second-round matchups between the Oilers, the Knights, and the Kraken and the Stars. On the Eastern side, you've got the Devils and Canes after their 2 series wins. Devils 1 and 7. I expect that to be an extremely tight series, but as a lot of people have said, the Devils' speed causes the Rangers problems. And even though Shesterkin played quite fantastic in that series, that offense was just not able to get going. And once the Devils made the goalie change and got Schmid in, that series just changed. So Devils were able to get the series win, even though they were down 2-0 in this series. The Canes were able to hold on to a couple series, even though they didn't finish it in 5. They were able to get it done in 6. They were able to make do and get some depth scoring, plus their power play was outstanding in the first round, even though they didn't have guys like Teravainen, Svechnikov, and Pacioretty for a majority of that first round. They were able to get scoring from other places. So they definitely show that they have really good depth this year to beat the Islanders. And guys like Ranta and Anderson were able to outduel Sorokin in this series. And then in the other side, the Leafs go through. I thought the Leafs were the better team in the regular season. And even though they didn't look like they were a dominant team in the playoffs, they were able to get the lucky bouncers. And they were able to come away with huge overtime victories. So even though it took them 3 overtime games in Tampa, I don't think it's too surprising the Leafs won. I do think it is a little bit surprising the Panthers were able to oust the Bruins. Then the President's Trophy winning team in Boston, I thought they would be ousted at some point. The President's Trophy winning team hasn't been to a Stanley Cup final, I think, since like 2012 or 2013. So I didn't expect Boston to make the Stanley Cup final. But I also didn't expect them to be bounced in the first round. I think the Panthers showed complete resilience, given the fact they were down 3-1 in the series, and they showed that they could push back really well. So all 8 series were really great, but you got the Carolina Hurricanes, New Jersey Devils, and the Florida Panthers and Toronto Maple Leafs in the second round for the Eastern Conference. Now, when I first predicted my thing, I said Knights in 5. Knights did win in 5, so I was completely right for that one. I said Stars in 6. Stars did win in 6, so I was completely right for that one. And I said Kraken in 7, and the Kraken did win the series in 7. So I got 3 series completely right. Got the team right, got the games right. Quite surprised that worked out that way. I got 2 series where I got the team right, but not the game right. I expected the Oilers and the Leafs to both win their series in 7, and they wound up winning their series in 6. So I don't think it's too surprising they won a game earlier than I expected, but I was a game off, so I at least got the team right. Then there was one series where I got the game amount right, but I didn't get the team right. I expected the Rangers to beat the Devils in 7. It was the opposite of that. Devils beat the Rangers in 7, so I don't think it's too surprising the Devils beat the Rangers, but I did expect the Rangers to be the more experienced team and come away with the series victory, so I am a little bit surprised about that. And then I got 2 series where I got both the team and the game number wrong. I expected the Islanders to beat the Canes in 5, and the Bruins to beat the Panthers in 6. It ended up being that the Canes beat the Islanders in 6, and the Panthers beat the Bruins in 7. So, this is there, but I got 5 out of the 8 teams going to the second round correct. And I got 4 out of the 8 series game length correct. So I consider that a win, given the fact that I only got 4 out of 8 right last year for the teams, and 2 of 8 game lengths correct last year. So I consider that a complete win, and I'm quite surprised that every single second round team that went on to round 2 this year, I actually predicted correctly. So that's quite a surprise for me, but good to see Dallas, Edmonton, Vegas, and Seattle all make it through. But this is going to be a wide open Stanley Cup final, one of the widest open we've had in a very long time. If you look at who's in the Eastern Conference side, the Hurricanes have probably been the most dominant team of all 4 of these guys in the playoffs. They know what it takes to win the playoffs. They got to the conference final a couple years ago in 2019, so they know what they need to do to win a playoff series, and they're not going to be an easy out. But they haven't been to a Stanley Cup final since 2006, when they won it against Edmonton. New Jersey, this was their first series win since 2012, when they went to the Stanley Cup final and lost to the LA Kings. The Devils also haven't won a Stanley Cup since 2003. So this has been a long time since the Devils have had any sort of playoff success. And the way that they handled the Rangers, I could see them go to the conference final as well. If you look at the Panthers, this is their second consecutive year winning a series in the playoffs. Before last year, their previous series win was all the way back in 1996 when they went to the Stanley Cup final. So they have had not very much playoff success. The Leafs, as we said, ended their 19-year drought. The last time they won a playoff series was back in 2004. So you have a lot of teams who have not had very much playoff success or deep playoff runs in the last 10, 20 years going to the second round this year. So, I mean, the Panthers have not been to a conference final since 1996. The Leafs have not been to a conference final since 2002. One of those 2 are going to go through to the conference final to face Carolina or New Jersey. So that's definitely interesting. On the flip side, Edmonton has not been to a Stanley Cup final since 2006. They were able to get to a conference final last year, but before that they haven't been to one in forever. The Stars went to the Stanley Cup final a couple of years ago in the bubble, but if you look before that, they were not able to get to a Stanley Cup final for a very long time. The Golden Knights are a team who's only in their 6th year, and they have been to one Stanley Cup final, but they haven't been to one since their first season. So they're going to be a team who's looking for a Stanley Cup. The Kraken are only in their 2nd season, so this is going to be a wide open playoffs. You got no dominant teams in the East. Usually you'd have a team like a Washington or a Pittsburgh or a Boston or a Tampa Bay. You have none of those teams this year. In the West, you usually have a team like a Colorado or a St. Louis, or back in a couple of years ago you had like a San Jose or a Los Angeles or even a Calgary. You have none of those teams this year. So this is a wide open second round. I could see possibilities for any one of these teams who are in the second round this year going to the Stanley Cup final. But with the changes that have been made with the 3 guys I did get wrong, I'm just going to give you my new predictions for the second round. So for the Dallas-Seattle series, I actually did predict Dallas-Seattle to face in the second round, and I said that Dallas would sweep the Kraken. Given the fact of how the Kraken were able to shut down the Avalanche, I'm going to give the Kraken a couple of wins. I'll say Dallas in 6 now. I still think Dallas has a deeper team on offense, and Dallas has the way better goalie in Ottinger, but I think the Kraken have shown that they can hang with the best of them. So, in my opinion, I'll say Dallas probably wins in 6, but don't count out the Kraken. I'll keep my pick. I said Knights and Oilers would face in the first round. I said Knights will win in 7. I'm going to stick with Knights in 7. I think the Knights are a much better defensive team than the Kings, and they should be able to hold down the fort against a guy like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And even against that, they were able to put a lot of pucks past Connor Hellebuyck, who is a much better goalie at this point than Stuart Skinner. So, in my opinion, I think this will definitely be a really tight series. It'll definitely be going to 7. But in my opinion, I think Knights are able to come away with the victory. If you look at the Eastern Conference, I did have Toronto playing Boston and Toronto winning 7 in my first predictions. But now that the Leafs are playing the Panthers, I'm going to say Leafs in 6. Panthers are not going to be an easy out. The Tkachuk has definitely shown that Panthers team can be really scary to play against. But in my opinion, with the Leafs now going past the first round, I think they could definitely make it to a conference final this year. So I'm picking Leafs in 6. And then the Devils have shown quite simply that they are a really good team. Their speed confused the Rangers a lot in this first round series. The Canes don't have the offensive firepower that the Rangers do. I think if the Devils can continue to play their game, I think Devils win in 6. I think that Canes will definitely have a couple of games that they'll win, but in my opinion, I think the Devils are going to win 6. So in my opinion, we should have a conference final in a couple of weeks, if everything goes to my predictions, of the Golden Knights and the Dallas Stars, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the New Jersey Devils. So we'll have to wait and see if any of my predictions are able to come true. But after going 5 for 8, picking the teams to go to the second round, I'm feeling pretty good that I can at least get 2 of those for going to the conference final. So that's all the playoff updates I want to get to today. Definitely going to be interesting to see who comes with the Stanley Cup this year, because the team who wins the Stanley Cup this year has not won it for a very long time. Now we're going to just go through some quick injury updates here. There hasn't been very many injury updates over the past little while, but there were a couple since we last talked. Blake Lizotte, who did miss games 3, 4, and 5 due to lower body injury for the LA Kings, was able to get back into game action in the Kings' final game against the Oilers in Game 6. So good to see that he was able to get into that final game for the Kings before they were eliminated. Michael Eyssimont, who had missed games 2, 3, and 4 for the Tampa Bay Lightning, was able to come back for Game 5, was a big reason why Tampa was able to push that series to 6. And he was able to get back into game action, so great news for Eyssimont. Nikolai Ehlers, who had missed the last week of the season, plus the first 4 games of the Jets-Knights series, was able to return and got back into game action for the Winnipeg Jets in Game 5 after recovering from his upper body injury. So good news for the Jets to get Ehlers back, even though it was in a losing cause. In that Game 5, the Knights were able to get Will Carrier back from his lower body injury. Now, Carrier had missed about a month and a half and the first 4 games of the series due to that injury, so it was not great news to see Carrier out for so long. He's a really good fourth liner, so good to see him get back into game action, and he should be able to continue to be healthy against the Oilers. Frederik Andersen, who had missed the first 5 games of the Carolina Hurricanes New York Islanders series due to an undisclosed injury, was able to return and got back into Game 6, helped the Carolina Hurricanes send the Islanders packing in Game 6, so good to see Andersen get back, and we should probably see more of him in the round 2 against the Devils. And then David Krejci, who missed games 3, 4, and 5 for the Boston Bruins due to an undisclosed injury, did get back in Game 6 and 7 for the Bruins. So even though it was in a losing cause, Krejci was able to get back in the final 2 games for the Bruins. So good news for them. But as for the players who got injured, Tanner Jeannot missed the last 2 games for the Tampa Bay Lightning with upper body injury. So with the Tampa Bay Lightning season now over, it doesn't really matter when Jeannot gets back. He should definitely be back before training camp. Brady McNabb, who suffered upper body injury, missed the Knights' 5th and final game against the Winnipeg Jets, and is currently day-to-day, but that was over a week ago, and with the Oilers series not going to be until Wednesday, I would expect McNabb to be back in the not-too-distant future. Then Ryan Lomberg, who we talked about last week, missed a game for the Panthers, missed the other 2 games for the Panthers as well, both games 6 and 7, and is currently week to week right now with upper body injury. So he's probably going to miss the next little while. Maybe he gets back towards the end of the series against the Maple Leafs, but definitely a big blow to the Panthers. Then you have Andrew Cogliano. Now, here's another clip I'm going to show you. Remember, all clips are credited to Sportsnet, but here's a clip I'm going to show you. Cogliano took a really big hit from Jordan Eberle, was slow to get up, and, well, he did return to the game in Game 6 and was able to play. It was later confirmed that he had a neck injury and was going to be out indefinitely and did miss Game 7. So, not great news for Cogliano. With the Avalanche series now over, he can probably just rest up and be healthy for training camp next year. So, not great news to see Cogliano out for that crucial Game 7, but as you can see, that was a pretty bad hit by Jordan Eberle. Also, Josh Manson, due to an undisclosed injury, missed the final 2 games for the Colorado Avalanche, both games 6 and 7. So, once again, their defense was really banged up in that series, and losing Manson for 2 crucial games was not really overly ideal for the Avalanche. And then Pavelski was a game-time decision after missing games 2 through 5 due to a concussion. It was a game-time decision for Game 6. Didn't go, but with him being that close to go in Game 6. It wouldn't surprise me if he was able to go in Game 1 or 2 for the Stars against the Kraken. So that's all the injury updates I'm going to talk about for today. There's definitely going to be some more injury updates before we talk again on Thursday. So definitely going to be some more injuries. But for now, that's all the injury updates we're going to talk about for today. And then we go over to the off-season rumor part of the video. Now, as we have over the past couple of weeks, just looking at some of these teams and seeing how they can improve in the off-season. Now, we've already gone through all the 16 eliminated teams who missed the playoffs. Now we're going to go through the 8 teams who have been eliminated in round 1. Now, we'll start with the 2 teams who were first eliminated. That is the Winnipeg Jets and New York Islanders. So we'll start with the Islanders. I wouldn't expect too much movement from them in the offseason, but I do expect some. If you look at the Islanders, they were able to sneak into the playoffs. They made a wildcard spot, but they were not one of the top-end teams, and they still have some trouble goal scoring. So, in my opinion, they need to try and shore up that goal scoring. It's really going to help them. They're still a really good defensive structured team, but they need to shore up that goal scoring. So, if you look at their team, if you look at net, expect a Sorokin extension of some sorts in the offseason. Sorokin's going to be a year away from being an unrestricted free agent. He's going to be eligible for an extension, and I would expect the Islanders to try and re-sign him. He's an extremely talented goalie. He'll probably wind up being one of the highest paid goalies in the NHL, but I think the Islanders really need Sorokin to be a really good defensive team, and if they were to let him go to free agency next year, that would be a huge loss. So expect for some sort of an extension on Sorokin. Hopefully they can work out something and it doesn't go into the season with him still being in the final year of his deal, but hopefully they're able to get something. It's going to be interesting to see who they bring in as backup. Semyon Varlamov is going to be an unrestricted free agent this year. He's probably going to leave via free agency, and if he does, you got a good prospect goalie like Tristan Lennox in the minors, but he's probably still going to be a couple of years away, so they're going to need a stopgap goalie right now to be backup to Sorokin. So it's going to be interesting to see who they bring in. If you look at their defensive end, I don't expect them to move basically anyone on that defensive end. They have a really good top 4 on that defensive end with guys like Ryan Pulock, Adam Pelech, Alex Romanov, and Noah Dobson, so I wouldn't expect them to move any of those guys. They have a couple of good young left shot defensemen like a Sebastian Aho, Samuel Bolduc, Robin Salo, who all could be really good third pair defensemen. But a guy like Scott Mayfield is going to be a pending unrestricted free agent this year and could leave. So will they try and move one of the guys like a Samuel Bolduc or Robin Salo to maybe play on the right side and try and round out the third pair internally? Or will they try and either re-sign Mayfield or go out and get another third pair defenseman? It's going to be interesting to see, but it's definitely something we should be keeping our eye on. And then for the forward group, they still have a pretty good team. I would expect them to probably keep most of that team intact, but 2 guys I would look out for on the forward group to be traded would be Josh Bailey and Jean-Gabriel Pageau. Bailey has 1 year left at a $5 million cap hit. Most of the second half of the season, plus through all the playoff games, Bailey didn't get into any game action. I don't think you can be paying a healthy scratch $5 million. So even if they were to have to move like a second or third round pick and move Bailey to a bottom dweller team that needs cap space for this year, like Arizona or Chicago, I think that's something you have to do and try and trade him away, get him to a different team where he can play some more and free up some cap space. As for Pageau, he's got a couple years left at a $5 million cap hit. But with the addition of Bo Horvat, you got like 3 top line centers in Horvat, Nelson, and Pageau, and you got a couple of other guys who could play center as well. So I don't think there's really much need for Pageau, who has a couple of years at $5 million a season playing on that third line as a third line center. So I would not be surprised if the Islanders try to trade Pageau to a team who's looking for like a second or third line center. And if they are able to move those 2 guys, that frees up about $10 million in cap space. And if they free up $10 million in cap space, they'll be able to go out and use that money to help that team. I think that team could definitely use maybe 1 or 2 top 9 wingers, maybe a top 6 winger. I mean, they have a couple of good prospects like Iskakov and Dufour, who should be NHL top 9 forwards in the next couple of years, but they do need a stopgap forward. So maybe you use that newfound cap space by moving Bailey and Pageau and go maybe via free agency and get a guy like Tarasenko and Kane, who they were linked to via trade over the past year. So maybe they go out, acquire someone via free agency, maybe they acquire someone via trade, but I think they could definitely benefit from adding another top 6 goal scorer. So if you're the Islanders, get an extension in place for Sorokin, try and find a backup for Sorokin as well, and then try and figure out who's going to be on that third pair next year, and then move on from Bailey and Pageau, and on top of moving on from those 2 guys, try and bring in another top 6 forward who can help you offensively. If you look at the Winnipeg Jets, they snuck into the last wildcard spots, only got like 95 points, barely beat out teams like the Calgary Flames and the Nashville Predators. And then even though they won Game 1, they didn't really give Vegas a huge challenge to overcome, so Vegas was able to get through the first round. I definitely think they have a ton of questions going into this offseason. In goal, you have Connor Hellebuyck, who's going to be entering the final year of his deal. And with the team possibly moving on from a couple of guys, if this team looks like they're going to retool or rebuild, Hellebuyck might not want to sign there. So if Hellebuyck's not going to want to sign there, long-term extension, then they're most likely going to have to try and at least explore trades. So the possibility of Hellebuyck being on the market would be too surprising, and for teams like LA or Pittsburgh who are looking for starting goaltenders, Hellebuyck could be a huge option for them. So it'd definitely be interesting to see, but I think Hellebuyck could be a guy on the market. They also have a guy like Riddick, who's a backup, who's also going to be an unrestricted free agency, so they could lose both their goalies if they wound up trading Hellebuyck and Riddick goes to free agency. So the goaltending position is definitely going to be interesting. They have a couple of good guys like a Salmonen and a Holm and a Berdon in the minors who could be good backups right now, but there's not really any starters. So if they're trading Hellebuyck, they got to have a plan in place for their starting goaltender for next year. Defensively, I think they're most likely going to keep guys like Morrissey, Pionk, Schmidt, Sandberg. I wouldn't surprise me if they tried to give Heinola some more playing time at the NHL level, but I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to move a couple of guys. Guys like Dylan DeMello and Brendan Dillon are both going to be entering the final year of their deals. I could see both of these guys be traded for assets that they could get. You got Logan Stanley, who at the trade line was rumored to be looking for a trade. I think Stanley could definitely get more playing time on another team, so I could see him being moved as well. So the Jets are going to be a really active team, possibly trying to rework that defense. On the forward group, that's the really big piece of the puzzle. Mark Scheifele is going to be a pending UFA. Blake Wheeler is going to be a pending UFA. Pierre-Luc Dubois really wants to go to Montreal, and even though he's an RFA, he might just take his qualifying offer and walk to free agency next year. So for the Jets, they're going to have to figure out those three situations. Can they get guys like Scheifele and Wheeler signed? Or if they're not going to re-sign, they're going to have to be traded. I don't think that they would want to leave the uncertainty of Scheifele and Wheeler possibly walking for nothing via free agency next year. So if I'm the Jets, I think that they're going to have to at least consider Scheifele and Wheeler trades as well. So Scheifele could possibly be gone. Wheeler could possibly be gone. Dubois, I think, is most likely going to end up in Montreal, whether this year or next year. And as much as they would be losing Dubois, I think they'd try and trade him to Montreal this year and just get whatever they can from the Canadiens. Canadiens have all the leverage right now, given the fact Dubois wants to go there, but I think if they can at least get something like a second-round pick and decent prospect for him, that would be good enough. A lot better than letting him walk via free agency. So if they're losing all these three guys, I definitely think they would definitely be going into either a retool or a rebuild sort of phase. I'm not exactly sure what they'd be doing, but they still have a couple of good pieces. Like, I think Ehlers could probably still stick around for next year. I think a guy like Kyle Connor could probably stick around next year. They still have a good young guy like Cole Perfetti. They have good prospects like a Lucius and a Lambert in the minors who could be good top 9 forwards in the next couple of years. So the future looks good for the Jets, but I just think with all these guys entering the final year of their deal and maybe not wanting to re-sign, this Jets team could look completely different come next year. So goaltending-wise, they got to have a plan for starter. If they do move on from Connor Hellebuyck, they could probably move one of their young goalies to like a backup role, but in my opinion, you got to have a plan for a new starter if you're moving Connor Hellebuyck. On the defensive end, look for guys like Dillon, like DeMello, like Stanley to possibly be moved. I think the Jets will probably try and rework that blue line to maybe bring in another defenseman and give Ville Heinola more playing time. And on the forward group, Dubois is most likely going to be gone after this year. You also got Scheifele and Wheeler, who I think could be gone after this year. And if those three are gone, you got a couple of depth guys being unrestricted free agents. This Jets team could look completely different come next year. So definitely going to be interesting to see. But I think the Jets teardown is coming in Winnipeg. Whether it's a retool or rebuild, it's going to be interesting to see. But I think guys like Hellebuyck, Scheifele, Wheeler, who have been long-time Jets, and Dubois is a really big piece of that top six, are almost likely going to be gone from Winnipeg in the offseason. So definitely going to be interesting to see. I'll definitely like to hear what you think down in the comments. Do the Islanders re-sign Sorokin on a long-term extension? And should they move guys like Pajot and Bailey if it means that they can acquire another good top 6, top 9 scoring forward? As for the Jets, Which guys do you think will be moved? Will Hellebuyck be moved? Will Scheifele be moved? Dubois, Wheeler. Which guys do you think will be moved? And do you think the Jets will be heading towards a retool or more of a rebuild in this offseason? Definitely like to hear your thoughts down in the comments. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I will link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.